Welcome to the second interview of On the Drop. I'm here with Savile Penkin. Savile is a man that's very well known in South Africa in the racing pigeon sport, and Savile is also very well known in many countries overseas. He's been the chairman of Western Province Homing Union for many years. He has also done exceptionally well as a loft racing in the Western Province Homing Union, and his achievements in one loft races in South Africa are unparalleled, aside for one or two that have been more lucky than him on the day. So Savile, I'd like to say thank you for having us here, and you are one of the legends of racing in the Western Cape, and that's why we're here.
Thank you. I'm honoured to be on your program, and I hope I'll be able to assist with whatever you're trying to do to encourage pigeon fanciers or look into the background of the pigeon sport in the Western Cape.
Thank you, Savile. Okay, for all of us, Savile, there's a beginning, and I see your beginning. When you entered the pigeon sport, you were suddenly found in the position of chairman of the Western Province Homing Union, and you've been in that position now for 28 years. What happened? How did that come about?
We were at an annual general meeting, and a friend of mine by the name of Claude Rothgieser, who I grew up with, and we kept pigeons from children together, he wasn't happy with what was taking place in the Western Province Homing Union at that time, and unbeknown to me, when it came to the election of chairman, he proposed me and somebody seconded me. It was totally unplanned, and I refused the nomination, but they forced it upon me, and then by majority vote I was elected to that position and have been there ever since. It's quite amazing.
Fantastic. And also, I know in recent years there's been an amalgamation of the South Peninsula Homing Union with the Western Province Homing Union.
Yeah. What happened is the Western Province Homing Union, like with most pigeon organizations, was losing membership. The South Peninsula, who were part of the Western Province many years ago, 20 years prior to that, were also losing membership. And then we had the Wynberg Union, who were on our doorstep, and they also didn't have a huge membership. And to be competitive, we found that you've got to race against more fanciers with more pigeons to prove yourself and to prove your birds. With the result that we had a number of meetings, and after a year of negotiations, we came together under the title of Southwestern Pigeon Combine, and that includes the three organizations, Western Province, South Peninsula and Wynberg Union, and we now have approximately 140 to 150 birds in our combine, members, beg your pardon, racing about 2,200 birds a week. We have combines every single week. And we pay out, or we award 30 positions, and we pay out the first 8 to 10 positions from the finance point of view.
And Southwestern Pigeon Combine have had some excellent results on the truck as well, so very, very good fanciers. But for all of us, as I always say, there's a beginning with racing pigeons. Where did Savile Penkin get bitten by this pigeon bug or pigeon hocha?
I've been asked that many times, because I've just completed my 61st year of pigeon racing, and it all started by when I lived in a ranch with my mother and father. We had big grounds, and we had lots of wild birds and budgies, parrots, zebra finches, rabbits, cats, dogs, everything. And we had a maid, cook, whose name was Eva, and she asked my mother if she could keep some pigeons in a cage which was right next to the kitchen. Her son Robert had pigeons, and he stayed in Somerset West, and she loved the pigeons too, so she brought some pigeons. So from a little boy we always had pigeons at home.
Okay.
She left us when I was about 5 or 6, maybe 7, and my mother and I went to a school fete at Sachs, the school that I was educated at, and at the fete there were fancy pigeons for sale. Somebody had put up cages, and We loved the white fantails, we loved the Jacobins and one or two others. And my mother bought me 2 pairs of each, and we brought them home and put them in the cage. And from then on, we always had pigeons at home. We had chickens in the cage next door, amongst other things. We've always been a family that have loved animals, birds, etc. And they were a little bit difficult to breed. We didn't know enough about them, and eventually a wildcat got into the cage and destroyed them all, and I was without pigeons for a while. We saw an advert in the paper, somebody selling racing pigeons, and they were 5 shillings in those days, equivalent of 50 cents a piece. We went out to Greenpoint near the traffic department, and we bought, I think, 3 pairs of these racing pigeons and took them home and put them in the cage. Again, after breeding with them, they were attacked by rats, and I lost a lot, and I continued to keep and get a few more. And then for my 13th birthday, my father built me a pigeon loft, and I actually started racing young birds of 1953.
Fantastic.
In 1952, I had helped a pigeon fancier by the name of Barney Ratner. He lived in a block of flats that we administered, and he had a loft at the bottom of the driveway, and my father mentioned to me I should go and speak to him and just learn a little bit about pigeons from somebody who'd been in the game most probably 30 or 40 years, which I did. And I used to sit at his house every race day, go to basketing with him, go to ring out with him, and came in contact with pigeons. I was still at school, of course, and I wasn't allowed to do lots of things, but I used to go down and visit him in Friedhoek on my bicycle, and very often he'd give me a lift up if the weather wasn't too pleasant. Otherwise I'd ride home, back home to do my homework and such like. So from 1952 I was involved with Barney and the pigeons, and he bred me babies and gave me eggs to place under pigeons that I had. And in 1953, in November, that was when we flew our Young Bird series, I competed, and the first race I was nowhere. I was probably 25 minutes off the pace. And the second race, I was first and third and couldn't believe it, and I think the bug bit me, scoring against very, very experienced pigeon fanciers at the time, and I've been involved ever since.
Yeah. Pigeon racing has often been described as an illness, especially by the wives of the pigeon fanciers. But it's amazing how many beginnings started with fancy pigeons or something. I personally like to thank the cat that got rid of the fancy birds and put you into the racing pigeons. With your loft here and your many years of racing, do you have a basic family of pigeons?
Yes, the basic family, I think, was the late Gus Routman, who was a specialist in the long distance racing especially. He was a wonderful artisan, but he was a really top fancier. He had raced very well with what he called Elman Putries. He got in Putries from Johannesburg, and his cousin Elman also got in. Gus seemed to breed around the family that flew on the long distance, 500, 800 kilometers upwards, and Elman specialized in the shorter. And I had birds then from Joop Knoop, the Weggie Janssens, which I had acquired at sales and from him, and they were doing very well for me. And Gus always said to me, if I really want to do well and be prominent in the game, I need to get one of these Elman Putries into the crossing of my birds. And one day out of the blue, he arrived at my house with this dark check white-flight cock, and he said this bird had gone back to Elman. He didn't know whose bird it was, where it came from, but the record showed it was very, very well bred. The bird was in shocking condition. It had obviously not been looked after, and I treated it over a period of 2 to 3 months and sprayed it for lice and everything, and ultimately purchased the bird and crossed it with one of the Knurpwegi Janssens, which was a hen, which was, when I say it was out of Knurpwegi Janssens, it had those birds had actually been bred by fancier Nucky Bouwmeester, who was packing up at the time. And Nucky, when I heard he was packing up, I phoned him and he said, I must just come along. And I said, I want two hens. And I ended up with 5 pigeons. And they were beautiful pigeons. And that cock mated to the one hen just bred me unbelievable races.
And that
was the foundation of my birds for many, many years. Until I started buying birds at the $1 Million Race. Top class racing birds from Germany mainly, to crossing with these birds and been very fortunate. Besides Germany, I must make mention that one of the sons of the Elman cock mated to the Weggie Janssen, which derived from Knurp stock, crossed with a clausing hen which I bought from the $1 Million. I was at an auction in Robertson and just fancied this little blue hen. 170, 184 was a number, and people said I'm crazy. I paid quite a lot of money for it, being a closing. And luckily I mated them together, and they just bred a string of winners. And my stock of today comprises mainly of that family of birds.
A lot of closing.
Half closing, half Weggie Janssen with the Elman Patrick cross.
To deviate a little bit, now that I'm thinking, we photographed the winners of the combines and the sections earlier this morning.
Yes.
And you took your bird out that won 2 combines for you.
Yeah.
And you said she's not the perfect handler.
Yeah.
So my question from that is, what do you consider important when you take a bird in your hands?
I think with experience you get a feel of what a bird should be. It shouldn't be too deep, it shouldn't be too shallow, it must have balance. The vents should be very close to the keel. It shouldn't show, in my opinion, a weak back, which would often result in the bird's tail lifting up when you handle it. It shouldn't be a struggler in the hand either, it should be docile. There's so many facets to the pigeons. They must also look the part. I had a good pigeon that was, to me, ugly, and I just couldn't carry on breeding with the bird, so eventually I got rid of it. So it must conform. Each fancier has an idea of how the pigeon should conform. And this hen that you took photos of this morning, classic hen, to win 2 combines in a year and have the best time on the truck against 400 fanciers, it is an achievement. And I'm sure that if I let half the top fanciers handle her in the organization, they would say she's a very nice bird, but but that we've had birds that handle superbly. If you want to put them on the show, they would win prizes, and I've had them myself, and they haven't done the scoring and flown as well as this hen has done in her first year.
Okay.
Hopefully she'll be able to continue next year. I didn't race her hard. She won 2 Victoria Wests, and I had her in the last Victoria West. She was my time bird, but she wasn't in the front pack of birds. But that was my own bad management.
Okay. There's a lot of theories in pigeon racing. The eye. Ever look at it?
Love the eye.
Do you love a nice eye, or do you look for something?
It's very debatable. I think each person has their likes and dislikes. I've been interested in eye sign for many, many years. I have a few books on it. I cannot say 100% that's the answer, because I don't believe it is. And a lot of people believe that the bird has got to have such and such an eye to be good. I have seen pigeons with reasonable eyes in my eye, and crossed with a certain other eye, have bred absolute champions. And what comes to mind was a hen that I sold on a squeaker sale, which was a very, very well bred hen, which was bought by the late Eddie Coetzee, who lived in Milnerton. And Eddie had a bird which he got from Dickie Pretorius as a baby.
Are we heading to the uglies now?
Well, and this pigeon that of Eddie's trapped at the neighbour Lenny Rousseau, and eventually he got it back. And when he let it out, it went back to Lenny Rousseau. So he got it back the second time, and then he said, I'm not going to race it anymore because I'm going to have trouble. And somehow the two birds mated. And the 1 year, in the first year of their mating, Eddie was first and second at the National Loft Race in Bloemfontein with a nest pair. And after that they went on and bred untold winners, this pair. I went down with my magnifying glass and I looked at the father, and in fact it was the other way around. He bought the bird from me was the cock and the hen was from Dickie. And that hen had, in my eyes, was one of the worst handling pigeons I've ever seen, and had a very ordinary eye. I would never put it in my stock lot. But something in that pair, in that mating, clicked. And so many champion pigeons derived from that mating was unbelievable. And that made me think you can't breed solely on eyes. There must be more to it.
Yeah.
But it's a very interesting topic, and it's very interesting. They say you shouldn't make two similar eyes together. I have mated two pearl eyes together, my 029 champion cock and his hen, the closing hen, are both pearl-eyed birds, and they bred me fantastic pigeons. But one can't keep mating pearls to pearls. So there is a lot in the eye. There's the colour, the iris, and the rings around the eyes, and healthy eyes and small pupils. All this has to be taken into account.
And the performance.
I think so, yes, generally. But I think breeding pigeons is even more definitive than that. You've got to have the will to win. You've got to have the pedigree. You don't want a pigeon that is too big and too heavy and too clumsy, and wings not in proportion to the body, etc., too high on the legs, and that. They'll come home, they'll be homers, but they won't be top-class racing pigeons, and that's what we all strive for, to breed a bird that handles well and has got all these other attributes.
You know what they say, there's two types of pigeons, good ones and bad ones. Of the bad ones there's plenty, of the good ones there's very few. So golden pairs, hold them together. But I'd like to move on. One Love Racing.
Yes.
That's really your, what would I call it, your passion.
Yes, I think one of the reasons being that you can test your birds. I breed birds to race, and then very often I have experimental pairs together, and if the babies are nice and my lofts are full, I like to enter them in the one loft races as a testing ground to see. And a few years ago I sent birds to a one loft race in Penkin, and did well with the offspring, and then I was able to continue breeding. I then sent birds to a race. It was a specialized race called the Sapphire race
Of
Mark Kitchenbrand, yes, where the rules were that you could only send 3 pigeons.
Okay.
And I sent 3, and I did quite well in that race as it happened. They had the auction, I brought my birds back, and after the race, Thomas Smith did me a big favour by sending the pigeons back to Cape Town for me, the bird that scored plus the other 2. And he's quite an authority on pigeons. I must say he's quite knowledgeable and very interesting to talk to, and he has many theories, and He sent me the birds down and he said to me, I want to tell you that if you made the checker cock to the blue hen, that would be my pick.
Okay.
And I joked to myself, I laughed at it because it was crazy. He only had 3 birds and there was one hen, 2 hens and a cock, so it had to be mated either way if they were going to be mated. And I mated them as he said. And lo and behold, I sent the one hen in 2011. I sent her to the $1 Million Race to race in January 2012. We waited. It was a very difficult race. We were sitting at a table with most probably 14, 16 people, and the birds were late, so we were drinking beer and more beer. And eventually, I got up. Two birds came early, and I got up to go to the toilet. And while I was in the toilet, I got a call on my phone from A.B. Swart, who was sitting up at the back of the stand, and he said to me, Queen of Hearts. I said, but that's my bird. He said, yes, you're fifth. I said, never.
Oh,
I cannot tell you what I said to him because I think I used some bad words. I didn't believe him, and I rushed out the toilet, and there it was on the board. The Queen of Hearts was fifth, first South Africa. And of course, it changed everything. It was the most exciting day in my life.
I remember.
And I was asked to make a speech on the stage, which I did, and ended up crying, overcome with emotion. This upset my wife, and she was crying. And then the journalists from the various newspapers and magazines got hold of me and took me to the loft, and they took photos of the bird with me and did a whole write-up, and it was really fantastic. It was a most brilliant reward for all my years in the pigeon sport.
Yeah, it can be very frustrating, and suddenly coming up and winning something like that. I think I'd cry as well, but I think it would be cry of tears of relief, joy, and bringing out the true passion for the pigeon sport. I mean, it means a lot, you know. My partner, we race, and we have a saying between us, it's only pigeons. But for many people, it's not only pigeons, it's really a way of life. Medication. Everyone wants to know, you know, everyone believes if you can get hold of this stuff, you're going to have it made. What is your take? Are we doing too much? Are we doing too little? Are we trying too hard? Are we looking in the wrong places? Should we be looking for better pigeons, better medication? Where should we aim?
You know, we had fanciers living in observatory many years ago called Miller Brothers. They didn't believe in medication. They only treated their birds with natural things. And their belief was that if a pigeon got sick, you killed it. You just put it down, but don't treat the birds. I think today times have changed, and I believe that everybody is treating their birds. In fact, they must probably treating their birds on a very regular basis, because there's so much that one can treat them for. And I think one of the problems is, whilst the birds are in your own loft, you are safe and they don't pick up disease or germs. But once you start racing and training, birds come back a day or two later. They bring something into the loft, especially from the race panniers, where you might have 40 birds in a pannier from different fanciers, and there could be a virus, there could be any type of infection. They're drinking out the same water trough. The birds come back exhausted, sometimes in the heat or after being out overnight when the mountains are closed and they can't get back. If you don't treat them, I believe you're going to bring your whole team down in no time at all. So my belief is, yes, you've got to treat them. I think most people you have to vaccinate for paramyxo today.
By law.
By law. We all vaccinate for pox, because if you don't, it's the most ugly thing. They get it on their eyes and their mouth, and they can't eat, and you can't basket them. So these things everybody does. That's part of the treatment. But I think that pigeons pick up worms, lots of worms, especially here. I'm on a lawn. I've got other birds coming here. I have to treat for worms on a pretty regular basis. I had an experience once when on a nice sunny day a pigeon made a dropping on the perch, and Charlie Ben from East London was in my loft, and he said to me, "What's wrong with that dropping?" And I said, "Why?" He said, "It's moving." And I said, looked at it closely, and it was tapeworm.
The white one.
Yeah, it was tapeworm, and I was shocked. And I treated them for worms and tapeworms, and I could not believe the number of worms that were found in a dropping. And that convinced me that you've got to deworm not once a year, but far more often. Yeah, you have to do that. Canker is one of our major problems, and birds are treated today regularly with canker, recommended to use different treatments each time so they don't become immune to the same one. I believe they need to receive medication for respiratory, and just generally things like coccidiosis, which I don't think is a major problem in Cape Town. We don't have that humidity, but I think they need to be treated once or twice a year for that. Best, of course, is to go to a vet and have them tested, and he will tell you if they've got malaria, if they need to be treated, if they've got worms, if they've got anything, and if they haven't got, then you don't need to worry with that. And I think medication today, it plays a very big part in pigeon racing. There are many types of medication which are sold locally, made by South African firms, and then of course there's those that come in from overseas, which are most probably in some cases even better, maybe because they have a different ingredient. But yes, I think everybody today is medicating and will not be able to win and keep their birds in top form for a season if they don't.
Yeah. Okay. Vitamins. Actually quite a controversial question, because a lot of fanciers that I know of race very well. We can include ourselves. We don't give vitamins. Do you use it?
I use vitamins certainly
regularly.
Because, yes, I just believe that it's supplementing the system for something that they might not be getting in their food or water. We don't know where the food's grown. So yes, I do it.
Okay.
The advert on each of these containers is so fantastic that you want to do it, in fact.
Yeah, advertising's a wonderful thing. Saville, when the birds return from a race, is there anything specific you give them? You mentioning you don't want to bring the disease into your loft. Are you at that stage catching any bugs that might be coming in with any type of product?
No, I as a norm give them an electrolyte mixture on their first return.
Okay.
Then, and depending on how difficult the race has been, sometimes I give them a little bit of salt in the evening in their water, dissolve a little bit of salt in just also to replenish the system. And the Sunday they might get medication, or they might get electrolytes again, and then on Sunday evening or Monday they might be treated for canker or coccidiosis or respiratory, depending on how flown and how they look. Not a cycle really, but regularly, and it's so dependent on how they perform that week. You know, if you've flown perhaps 20 or 30 minutes after others, you know if the returns from the race have not been the same as others. If you're losing pigeons, there's something wrong and you've got to treat. But if you're just behind, it might be a bad trap, you might be a minute or two. You know the birds are okay. And also you've got to take into consideration that maybe you've selected 20 birds out of 80 and the winners are left in the loft. You've got to consider that as well.
Absolutely.
So a good training toss, perhaps from 200 kilometers with others and compared times, will also give you an idea if your birds are on par with them fitness or not. And then one's got to consider the way you feed. If your birds are overweight, they're not going to be able to keep the pace, and if they're underfed, again, you're going to fall behind. So it's a very big balance of feeding to exercise. then you can start thinking about medication.
I'd like to actually sum it up with what you're saying. Be observant. Look how they're coming.
Yes.
Don't look for trouble when there isn't trouble.
Yes.
I think that's what we do. If they race well, we leave them alone, generally.
Yes.
Okay, but after racing so many years, there must be a few fanciers that stand out. Perhaps names I haven't even heard of, because I'm younger than you. Who are the great guys that you have raced against, the top fanciers?
Well, when I raced in the Cape Town Club, we had a fancier called Franz Rulofse. Rulofse.
Okay.
He was in charge of the public gardens, and he was an absolute brilliant fancier, and he had certain ideas which we hadn't heard of, and his loft was in the public gardens in Queen Victoria Street, and he won out of turn. He would be one fancier in 20 weeks that could most probably win anything between 10 and 12 races a year and break our hearts regularly. There was another fancier in town at that time called Heini Richter, also exceptional, and Heini in fact helped Franz. They became very friendly in achieving what he did. But Franz was a very intelligent man, and he knew a little bit about physics and what have you, and he was able to medicate and do things. He was the one, the first time I ever did, soaking food to let it germinate, to feed germinating food to the birds for a few days, to get all the natural vitamins and wheat germ and things like that into the birds.
And moving into our let's call it, I'm not making you old now, but into our modern era.
Then when I moved to Rondebosch here, and I joined the Weinberg Homing Society and the Western Province Homing Union, we had three fantastic fanciers, one of which is still alive and I'm still friendly with him, and that's Claude Rothgieser.
Okay.
Claude Rothgieser raced like an absolute champion here. Today he lives in Canada. He's still very involved in the pigeon sport, and we correspond from time to time. But there were three R's, and that was Rothgieser, Routman and Ramsey. And you couldn't say you'd won a federation unless you had beaten them, because they were deadly. They're absolutely deadly.
A question which I think you are well placed to answer, given your administrative role at SANPO level at times in the past, and as a chairman, and you're on the WCPTA committee, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
Where is this sport heading? What is the future of racing pigeons in the Western Cape?
It's difficult to answer. I think that we are struggling to encourage the youth into the sport. I think due to the fact that the cost of racing pigeons today is almost prohibitive to the man in the street. We can see it that I'm in a fortunate position that I could go to a place like Wellington Foods or Kitchen Brand or our friends in Somerset West and buy enough food for the season, where certain fanciers can go buy food for 2 weeks or 3 weeks until he gets his next pay packet, and he can't afford all the medication, etc. So we're losing fanciers more and more each year, and we've got to encourage them by getting into the schools, I think, and this is happening at the moment, and this is also why one-off racing, I think, will flourish, because people who can't keep birds at home, or a lot of birds, and look after them and train them, which is very expensive, they can at least breed at home and put 6 birds into a one-loft race and see how they go and have an interest in that. And with internet today, and you can see the results immediately, it's wonderful. So you're racing, but you're not actually racing in your own backyard.
Okay, that's great. We all agree we need younger guys in. What about changing or providing a different race program? I know it's very difficult. We look at something like the PPL, which is you can race there, you can keep less birds, and you can be competitive racing 6 birds a week. Do you think there's going to be a growth in the support of these races up to 500 k's, 550 kilometers, for the guys that cannot afford to race in NRHE or Western Province?
I don't think the PPL is catering for guys who can't afford it. I think the PPL is catering for people in the Somerset West Strand area who feel they're at a disadvantage racing against Paul, Belleville and us, for example, at the back here. So that's how they came about. I think the idea is fantastic, and I think that if one is racing and you want to get your birds trained up an extra 200 or 250, it's a good place to be.
And something like that running on our traditional route for all fanciers that are around.
I think that would be far more favourable. They would get,
Yeah.
if they ran up our route instead of up the west coast, which is a killer.
We don't want to talk about it.
Yeah, it's unfortunately it's desert and there's no water there, and the losses can be very high. Whereas on the normal route we seem to have far better returns.
Okay.
So I think they're serving the people very nicely, and I'm happy for them. But I think that could be as a second race on a weekend and used for training as well. But I think the N1 is the direction that one needs to race from.
To cater for the majority.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Any beginners out there that would like to get into this wonderful sport of pigeon racing, what's your advice to them? Go all over the show and grab pigeons and start racing? How would you advise them?
Well, they must befriend somebody in the area first of all. They must visit that fancier on a regular basis and learn about pigeons. They must learn, and he would mentor them and tell them what they must and must not do. For example, he would perhaps see that they have a nice loft built. It doesn't have to be with the best materials. It doesn't have to have a pitch roof.
It's functional.
Adds up.
Yeah.
But yes, we've seen pigeons race to anything, but it must not get drafts, and the rain mustn't come in, etc. Once they've got that, if they go to a good fancier, so often it comes to the end of the season and the fancier's taking eggs off his best birds, and he's throwing them away.
Yes.
Because he wants to split them. He could take over those eggs and rear them under his birds and keep good records of them. That would give him a very good base to work off to start with.
Okay.
Then secondly, and even more importantly, when you consider the cost of entering races like the $1 Million and Dino King, plus all the other one-loft races, I would say that the average fancier sends of his best to the $1 Million. He sends of his best to like Dino King, and thereafter you have the one-loft races. All these birds come up for auction or for sale after the event. There are thousands of birds which are being sold each year, and a lot of them go for ridiculous prices.
Absolutely.
And you find that people who paid 10,000 rand, 11,000 rands to enter the $1 Million, their pigeons come up for sale and they sold for 300-400 rand. Because the birds haven't done particularly well, although they're bred of brilliant stock. They haven't done well, and nobody wants those birds. They're all trying to buy imported birds, the birds from overseas, which is the flavour of the month. So they would be able to get excellent pigeons, excellent stock, and then they've just got to, by trial and error, find a few matings, and I'm quite sure they wouldn't have to look further than that. They could go to a sale like Dino King and buy 10 birds perhaps at an average price of between 400 and 500 rand, maybe less, and they could have some fantastic pigeons.
That's probably the best advice I've heard. You know, we've always heard go to the champion in your area and let him breed for you. It doesn't happen that easily. Eggs maybe overseas, people tend to buy around for eggs.
Yes.
Very unheard of in South Africa, but the one-off races I think is where they should be aiming. So anyone out there watching, whether in South Africa or overseas, I think this is not a theory. This is a way that could definitely be explored. Saville, we've had some problems with our friends at the SPCA,
Yeah.
and I've been sitting here thinking, should I or shouldn't I ask you, what would you like to get out there to make known about pigeon fanciers in the Western Cape? I mean, are we abusing these pigeons? Are we at fault? What would you like to say to the SPCA if you could mention something to them today?
I'm extremely disappointed with the SPCA, and I love animals, and I can only tell them that pigeon fanciers are dedicated sportsmen, and the way that 99% of pigeon fanciers look after their pigeons is equal to the way they look after their family. They give them of the best. They treat them with the best available. They train them as best possible. And when they send them to the race, there will be losses, unfortunately. We lose them into hitting wires. We lose them to hawks. We lose them to predators, which, if they land on the ground going for water, that there might be a stray cat or something like that. Yes, we do have losses, but in the main, the number of pigeons that do return, they train for it, they bred for it. You can't have somebody who doesn't know anything about pigeons and telling you when you can liberate your pigeons and where you can liberate your pigeons. I mean, I've been in the game over 60 years. I know where you can let pigeons go and the weather and what to expect. And when the pigeons are liberated, we know more or less within 15 minutes to half an hour how long it should take for those pigeons to get back. And it's been proved over and over. I think if the SPCA were going to be involved in pigeon racing in any way, they need to sit down and they need to give us somebody who has a background of the sport so that we can deal with them, who would understand what we're doing, and then they wouldn't make these rash statements. They have caused immense problems over the last 2 weeks with a letter written to the SANPO president, Mr. Fontigilma, stating that there's a proclamation in the Government Gazette going back to the 1st of August that precludes pigeon racing.
Prohibits, makes it illegal.
Yes,
Yeah.
and all that. And they didn't apply their minds. They were so quick to send this letter and make threats of reporting to the ministry. And that's uncalled for. And they've upset a lot of pigeon fanciers and pigeon fanciers from overseas. You cannot believe how they've written and by email to inquire what is going on in South Africa, that the ministry would take such a harsh step against pigeon racing, which has been something going on for over 100 years. The Queen of England has a pigeon loft and sends pigeons to the $1 Million. And Europe is huge. They used to have over 300,000 pigeon fanciers in Belgium, Holland big, America's big. All these countries, China today is huge.
It's massive, yes.
How can they say that we can't raise pigeons and transport them and breed off them, that it would be illegal? It's nonsensical. And there are many of us who, if they change their attitude, and the SPCA actually survive on donations in the main, we would gladly donate to them. I used to get a circular sometimes twice a year asking me for donations. When I heard and saw their attitude to pigeons and pigeon racing, that they want to ban it, I had to write to them twice to tell them to stop sending me anything for fundraising. I'm not interested, neither are my friends, neither anybody associated with pigeon sport will donate to the SPCA, because they're doing us more harm than good. When they get off our backs and they look at it as a pigeon sport, and that we are doing our very best at all times for them to get them home from a race, we prepare them, we would gladly start donating to them again. And I want to ask them, why are they so intent on bringing laws in for pigeon racing when horse racing is much the same? they let the horse go over 2 miles, whatever it is, in 3 kilometers or something, and the jockey whips the pigeon. We don't whip the pigeon. The pigeon is let out. He flies as fast as he can to get home. And if he can't make it home, he'll go down somewhere and maybe drink some water, and the next morning he'll get up and he'll come home. But that's fine. I mean, the pigeons in the natural do that. But they seem to be intent on breaking our pigeon sport, which we will not accept. We were quite prepared to put money in to go to the High Court and have this rule overturned, because it was really most unfair. And the way they did it, they also, the SPCA have a representative invited to SANPO meetings, which I'm totally opposed to. I don't think they have any place at our meetings. If they've got something to say, they can be at the meeting for half an hour, 20 minutes, whatever, and once they've said what they had to, they must go. And the committee must then act on what has been said. But to have a representative sitting at our meetings throughout the day, to me, and I was a member of the old organisation on the committee, it's a no-no. I wouldn't sit with them. They've done absolutely nothing for our sport. Everything that the SPCA have done has been against the pigeon sport, and we can't encourage them to be part of us in any way. We must fight them whenever and wherever we can.
So we need to look after our own sport. We should have standards that we should set. We should actually put them at ease, because my opinion, and the person giving the interview shouldn't give his opinion, but my opinion is, if we've done everything in our power to ensure the pigeons are looked after, we've done everything we can do. There will be losses.
Yeah.
There will be races where many birds will get lost, but it's never the intention. And I think in any legal environment, what was your intention? That becomes very clear. So pigeon fanciers are not there to lose their pigeons.
I think what is also important is that we have been forced to affiliate to SASCOC, and we are therefore part of a universal professional body that looks after the various sports.
Yeah.
And we happen to be a sport which is accepted in every country in the world. So why bring in something like this, and with the attitude that they have done? I believe the person who wrote that letter
Jumped the gun.
he jumped the gun, and I do know that legal action is being instituted against the SPCA, and I do know that the pigeon fanciers, if asked, will contribute to go to court and take the SPCA to court, and if they end up having to deregister for any reason, so be it, because what they've done is just not acceptable to the pigeon person.
I think a nice way to end the interview is just to tell everyone that that ban or that proclamation of illegal pigeon racing, that the Minister of Environmental Affairs has said pigeon racing is not banned. And on that note, I'd like to say thank you.
Thank you very much for
Saville, and all the best for your years that lie ahead, and we hope to see you at the top of the $1 Million and other races as well.
Well, we're there. We've got birds entered for January, and we'll be there for the race. That's one race I haven't missed. This is the 19th year, and looking forward to it very much.
We'll see you there. Thank you.
Made some fantastic friends there.
Thank you, Saville.
Thank you very much.